Have you ever felt like you've planted your plants in the garden and they've just stuck in time, or even worse, withered up and died within a couple days? Well, I'm going to show you the strategies that I use to prevent and restore your plants from transplant shock. Transplant shock is exactly what it sounds like. It's when you take a plant that's already been grown in some sort of cell or pot, you take it out and you plant it in the ground. And when you do that, you inevitably disturb some of the roots that they've worked so hard to grow, and sometimes the plants just stall and do nothing for weeks or even months, or even worse, they just wither up and die because they weren't able to establish in their new home. Well, there are tons of ways that we can actually prevent this from ever occurring. And if you do see it occur, we have some great strategies that will help you restore your plant's health and vigor and get you growing an amazing garden. At first, they creep, and the second, they leap. Meaning that when you plant a plant the first year, it takes them a lot of time to establish and they struggle a little bit. But the second year, they absolutely boom with growth. But when we're growing a vegetable, herb, or flower garden, we don't have multiple years to get things established. So it's imperative that we do the best that we can to plant them properly so we can get them growing as fast as possible. First, let's talk about essential prevention tips, because if we can prevent transplant shock from occurring, that is the best case scenario. And the first essential tip that I want to share is add compost or fertilizers before you plant your plants. And in my opinion, this should be done at least 2 weeks before you plant your plants, because what you want to happen is that soil life to wake up. Not only wake up, but start breaking down those fertilizers, those organic natural fertilizers that you're adding, so that way they can be absorbed by the plants. We have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, vitamins and minerals. All of these things are active in your soil, but it takes the microbiology in the soil to be active in order to break them down and supply them to your plants. And when all of these things are active, it allows for water and nutrient uptake into the roots, which will help your roots grow stronger and establish the plant, and then will allow the plant for itself to grow. One of the worst things that I see a lot of gardeners do is actually fertilize in the hole that they're planting in. And in my mind, knowing how plants grow, that is a huge detriment to your plant's growth. Because what you're doing is basically saying, here, baby plant, here's everything that you need in this tiny little hole that I just planted you in. You don't need your roots to spread out. You don't need to send out roots to find the nutrients that you need, and that's going to limit your plant's ability to grow a large root system and establish even faster. And this is why it's imperative to actually mix in the compost and the nutrients into your soil before you plant your plants. My second essential tip is don't plant your plants too soon. Every single plant in the garden has an ideal temperature range at which they want to be planted. And I don't necessarily mean outside, even though it does have some effect, but we're talking about the soil temperatures. If you can plant your plants at the right time, when the soil temperatures are right, that means the specific microbes that they need, that those plants need to survive and thrive, are going to be active and support the plant's growth. So for example, I have got some tomatoes behind me. It's really best to wait until our soil temperatures are around in the 60-degree Fahrenheit range. Once they reach 60 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer, it's a perfect time to get your tomatoes in the ground. Maybe in the past you've planted them early and you just see them sit there and stall for weeks. It may have been because the soil temperature is just not warm enough yet. So that's going to be directly related to the temperatures that you see outside. Once your temperatures are in the 60s at nighttime, or maybe in the upper 50s, that's probably around the time you want to plant your tomatoes, because that warm sun is heating up the soil, and the consistent nighttime temperatures will basically keep the soil temperature relatively consistent and ready to plant your tomatoes. My third essential tip is harden off your plants. And if you've never heard this before, what it means is to slowly acclimate your plants to life outdoors before you actually plant them in the ground. Maybe you started your plants from seed like I did, or you purchased them from a nursery or a big box store. You may or may not know the conditions that they have been growing in, and they may not be ready to be planted in the ground. The conditions outside are much harsher than the conditions that you had indoors. For example, I was growing these inside. It's pretty much 70 degrees all the time. It's got consistent light, consistent water. Outside, it is not the same. And just the sunlight alone is so much brighter than any light you could supply your plants indoors. So we need to take the time to transition them to life outside. And how do you do this? So what I like to do is gradually expose them to life outside where I'm going to actually plant them in the garden. And a lot of people will say, do this in half an hour increments every single day. And if you could do that, that's absolutely fantastic. So just take your plants, put them outside for a half an hour, and bring them inside. The next day, put them outside for an hour, and then bring them inside. The next day, an hour and a half, etc., etc. I think you know where I'm going with this. Until they're outside all day long. Once they're outside all day long and the temperatures are right, then it's okay to get these planted in the ground. But if you're someone like me who works full time, you may not be able to actually put your plants out for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours a day because it's just literally in the middle of your workday. So do the best that you can. Any amount of time of hardening off is going to significantly benefit your plants rather than just getting them from their pots and immediately planting them in the ground. I'm telling you, you're going to see a huge impact and success rate overall. My fourth tip is transplant on a cloudy or even rainy day. This is going to significantly reduce the exposure from the sun and minimize the demand on the plant itself. If it's really hot outside, even if it's really bright outside, you can immediately see your plants just wither up from that bright sun exposure. So aim for a day where you know it's going to be overcast or cloudy or honestly even better raining, because that will help to water those roots as soon as they're planted in the ground. And you'll see this have a huge impact on your plant's ability to recover after planting. My fifth essential prevention tip is water your plants thoroughly before and after transplanting. Having moist soil significantly reduces the stress on the plant because it has the ability to uptake water and, as we talked about before, uptake nutrients. And nutrients is what allows your plants to actually recover, grow new and stronger roots, and begin the overall growth process. So we want to make sure that the area that we're planting the plant in, that the soil is moist, so that way those roots can spread. And when we plant them, we want to make sure that we're watering the soil, so that way the soil around the plant that we just planted can actually merge with that root ball of the plant. Another thing is you can reaffirm that soil, press down that soil around the roots, so that way you don't have any air pockets. Because what happens to roots when they hit air? They die off. So we want to make sure that we're planting it in nice, moist soil. We're reaffirming that soil around the plant and giving it a nice water, so that way we can merge that all together and allow the roots to expand and absorb all of that moisture and nutrients. And my sixth essential prevention tip is following root-friendly practices. Anytime possible, I want to prevent planting root-bound plants. And that's why I love growing my plants from seed. I'm going to show you a bad example to start off with, because I know these marigolds have been in these cells a little bit too long. But hey, now we have a good teaching moment. This is what a root-bound cell looks like. And these epic trays actually do great at air pruning my plants, so I don't normally get root-bound plants. But this is the worst case scenario that you're gonna get out of these air pruning trays. We've got roots that are spiraling around this root ball here, and these plants are not going to transplant as well because the root mass is just so large. They're used to be constantly fed and watered, and it's gonna take a lot more energy for them to be able to send out new roots and establish themselves in the garden. And you can see this be even worse with plants that you get at the nursery, because they're in circular pots and you'll just see those roots spiral around and around and around and around and around. And guess what's going to happen? Those roots aren't going to expand out into your garden soil. They're just going to stay in that little ball. So unfortunately, what we have to do is actually tease those roots and damage them a little bit in order to force them to grow outward. But that is absolutely essential if you're planting root-bound plants. And that's why in any time possible, I prevent planting root-bound plants. So the next time you go to the nursery or the big box store, actually take the plants out and look at their roots before you purchase them. So that way you're just not wasting your time and money planting roots in the garden that you know aren't going to do as well. Here is an example of a much better and healthier root system. You could see that there is actually soil still available. And when I plant this plant out in my garden, these roots are going to immediately spread out and they're going to absorb all of that water and nutrients that I have available in the garden. And transplant shock is just not going to happen. So if you want to prevent transplant shock from even occurring, make sure you follow these 6 steps. But if you see transplant shock already happening, make sure you keep watching for these essential recovery tips. My first essential recovery tip is utilize shade. If you see your plants struggling because of their transition to life outdoors, one of the main things could be loss of water. If your plant isn't absorbing as much water as it's losing, it's gonna go through some serious transplant shock in order to use all of those resources that they need to grow more roots to have access to more water. And one way that you can prevent that is by covering them. And it doesn't need to be anything fancy. You don't have to specifically buy a shade cloth. I love using my bug netting for my broccoli, for example, because it, one, keeps the temperatures lower, it reduces the sunlight exposure, and it helps to keep the soil cool, which is going to help the plant establish. My second essential recovery tip is keep your soil evenly moist. Water fluctuations can cause a lot of stress for your plants. They need water in order to uptake water and nutrients, but inconsistent water can cause even more harm than good and increase the amount of time it takes for your plant to recover from transplant shock. So what I want you to do is actually come out to the garden every few days and water your plants. Yes, you heard me right, every few days. And I commonly hear gardeners come out and say that they're watering their garden every single day. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that is terrible for your plants. The reason being is similar to how we don't want to fertilize our newly planted plants in the hole. We want to broadcast it out throughout the garden is because we want our roots to spread. If we're going outside and watering our plants every single day, the roots are only going to have water at that surface level or in that root ball that we planted. And we don't want that. We want the roots to expand out. So if we come out here every few days and deeply water the garden, all of our garden soil is going to be moist. And those roots will have the ability to find that water, expand the root system, and all of this is going to significantly reduce the amount of time that your plants are undergoing transplant shock. My third essential tip for recovering from transplant shock is using mulch. And mulch has so many fantastic benefits for the garden. But in terms of recovering from transplant shock, it really does 2 main things. And that's 1, retains moisture in the soil, and 2, stabilizes soil temperatures. If we're covering the soil, we're going to reduce the amount of moisture that is actually lost from sun exposure and evaporation, which is going to help keep our soil evenly moist. And it's also going to lower the overall temperatures of the soil and create an environment that will allow our soil microbes to thrive and provide the moisture and nutrients that our plants' roots need in order to establish. So providing even a thin layer of mulch on top of your garden can have significant benefits for its overall health and productivity. But now that we've covered the essential prevention and recovery tips, I want to show you some advanced techniques that will help get your garden growing faster and better than ever before. My first advanced recovery tip is using a mycorrhizal fungi inoculant. And this bag alone, right here, this little bag has lasted me over 2 years. So a little bit goes a long way. But what mycorrhizal fungi does is establish essential connections between your plant's roots and the microbes that live inside the soil. And the more you use this, the larger that biome will become. And your plants and your garden will just become healthier and healthier and healthier over time. Mycorrhizae naturally exists in every piece of soil. But what we can do in order to quicken the growth and reduce the transplant shock or prevent it from even occurring is by adding a little bit at the time of planting. Every single plant that I plant out in my garden, I just take a little bit of mycorrhizal fungi and sprinkle it directly on the plant's roots when I plant it into the garden. And I have seen a significant difference in just how fast my plants start to grow and thrive. My second advanced and final tip for preventing and recovering from transplant shock is using amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of life. And when you provide this to your plant's roots, or even as a foliar spray, it helps your plants have better access to the minerals and nutrients in your soil and helps to create stronger and denser root structures, which are going to allow your plants to absorb more moisture and more nutrients and pretty much make transplant shock non-existent. This stuff from Green Gro is honestly absolute magic. I want to tell you a quick story. I had a kiwi plant, a hardy kiwi plant that was growing on my property. And honestly, I didn't plant it in the best spot, but it was growing there for 3 years. So I finally decided to build an arbor for it and move it. So I obviously had to dig it up out of the ground and move it and plant it in a new location. And if you know, transplant shock happens. I've had numerous trees die, numerous plants die, so it is a real thing. But as soon as I planted it in the ground, I immediately did a soil drench of liquid aminos, and I was absolutely amazed at how fast this plant recovered. It was green, it was vibrant, it was growing absolutely fantastically. And now it's taking over the arbor that we provided it and has fruits growing for the first time. So I'm really excited to have this result. And for me, anytime I see a new product out to make gardening better, I'm always hesitant. But using this and seeing the results that I have had in my garden, it is absolutely spectacular. This literally prevents and makes transplant shock of any kind completely disappear and allows your plants to restore themselves and get growing even faster and better than ever before. Well, I hope you enjoyed the chickens clucking in the background and all of the information that we put out today. If you have ever struggled with transplant shock, you absolutely have to try these essential and advanced prevention and recovery tips on your vegetable, herb, or flower garden. I'm telling you, even applying just a few of these things, even just applying the essential tips will get your garden growing so much faster and better than ever before. Like we said at the beginning, at first they creep and the second they leap. So it's up to you to do everything that you possibly can to get your garden growing as good and as fast as it can this year, so that way you can reap the rewards and the benefits of growing a garden in your own backyard. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and if you did, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel for even more backyard homesteading videos, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.